The grand courtroom of New York City buzzed with tension. A high-profile corruption trial was underway, with cameras flashing outside, eager for the next twist. Inside, Judge Malcolm Reed, a stern and notoriously arrogant man, leaned back in his chair, smirking at the young man sitting quietly in the audience. Barron Trump, just 18, watched the proceedings with an unusual calmness. He wasn't dressed like a lawyer, nor did he seem particularly concerned about what was happening, yet there was something about him, an air of quiet confidence that unsettled those who noticed. The trial was against Senator Richard Callaway, a powerful politician accused of financial fraud. His defense team had fought hard, but moments ago their lead attorney had abruptly stepped down due to an emergency. Now the senator was left scrambling, his fate hanging by a thread. Judge Reed scoffed. "Well, unless you have a replacement attorney, this case is as good as lost." A murmur spread through the courtroom. And then, to everyone's astonishment, Barron Trump stood up. "I'll be representing the senator," he said calmly. Laughter erupted. The judge chuckled, shaking his head. "You? A teenager? This is a court of law, not a high school debate club." But Barron didn't flinch. He simply walked toward the defense table and placed his hands on the desk. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, met the judge's. "Then let's see if you can handle the truth," Barron said, his voice steady. The courtroom fell silent. Something told them. This wasn't a joke. A ripple of hushed whispers spread across the courtroom. Journalists leaned forward, their pens poised. The prosecutor smirked, arms crossed, waiting for the inevitable humiliation. Judge Reed scoffed, shaking his head. "Son, this isn't a game. Do you even have a law degree?" Barron's expression remained unreadable. "The law allows a defendant to be represented by any qualified individual of their choosing. Senator Callaway has just appointed me as his counsel." The judge's smirk faltered for a brief second. Technically, Barron was right. He could proceed if the senator agreed. Callaway, sensing no better option, hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yes, I trust Barron Trump to represent me." A collective gasp echoed in the chamber. The judge clenched his jaw. "This is absurd," he muttered, but he had no choice. The law was the law. The prosecutor, a seasoned attorney named Jonathan Hale, stepped forward with a grin. "All right, let's humor the kid," he said. "Let's see if he can even understand the charges, let alone defend them." The judge banged his gavel. "Fine, but I won't tolerate nonsense in my courtroom. One mistake, and you're done." Barron took a deep breath and calmly adjusted his tie. "Then let's begin," he said. His voice held no fear, no hesitation. And for the first time, Judge Reed felt something unexpected: doubt. A tense silence filled the courtroom as Barron Trump stepped forward. He moved with the confidence of a seasoned attorney, his piercing gaze locked onto the prosecutor. Jonathan Hale smirked. "All right, Mr. Trump. Since you're so eager to play lawyer, let's start simple. Do you even know the charges against your client?" Without hesitation, Barron replied, "Senator Callaway is accused of misappropriating $10 million in government funds, violating Section 1341 of the U.S. Code. The prosecution alleges that these funds were funneled into offshore accounts under shell corporations linked to his associates." Hale's smirk wavered. The room, once filled with murmurs of doubt, fell completely silent. Barron continued, stepping toward the prosecution's table. "Your case is built on a single assumption, that the senator had knowledge and direct control over these accounts, but you failed to provide irrefutable proof that the transactions were authorized by him." Judge Reed rolled his eyes. "That's basic legal argument, boy. The prosecution has evidence." Barron turned toward the judge. "Evidence that's circumstantial at best." He grabbed a document from the defense table and held it up. The prosecution's primary witness, Mark Jensen, claims that Senator Callaway signed off on these transfers. But in Jensen's original statement, filed 6 months ago, he never mentioned the senator's involvement. Hale's jaw tightened. Barron flipped to another page. And yet, just last month, after being offered immunity, Jensen suddenly remembered Callaway's role. He paused, his voice razor-sharp. "That's called coercion, Mr. Hale." The crowd gasped. The judge leaned forward. for the first time actually paying attention. The prosecutor opened his mouth to counter, but no words came out. Barron Trump wasn't just holding his own, he was dismantling their case. A stunned silence gripped the courtroom. Even Judge Reed, who had mocked Barron just moments ago, now found himself watching the young man with growing unease. Jonathan Hale, the veteran prosecutor, cleared his throat, forcing a smirk. "Clever, Mr. Trump. But testimony under immunity is a standard legal practice. It doesn't make the witness unreliable." Barron tilted his head slightly. "True, unless..." He walked to the projector screen and pulled up a document. "This is Mark Jensen's financial statement from 2 years ago, completely clean, and this..." He clicked the remote, switching to a new document. "Is his updated bank record from 3 weeks ago." The screen showed a suspicious deposit of $250,000 from an undisclosed entity. A murmur spread through the audience. The judge's expression darkened. Barron let the moment settle before continuing. "Your key witness received $250,000 just days before his testimony. If the prosecution wants to claim that's a coincidence, I have a bridge to sell them." Hale clenched his fists. "That doesn't prove..." Barron cut him off. "It proves reasonable doubt, which is all I need." He turned toward the jury, his voice unwavering. "If there's even the possibility that Jensen was paid off, then how can you trust his testimony? How can you convict a man based on the word of someone who might have been bought?" The courtroom felt electric. Even the most skeptical observers were now questioning the prosecution's case. Judge Reed, his arrogance now replaced with something resembling concern, shifted in his seat. He tapped his gavel lightly, but his usual confidence was gone. "Mr. Hale, do you have a response?" Hale was speechless. Barron Trump had just flipped the entire trial on its head. The courtroom was no longer in the prosecution's hands. The smugness that once radiated from Jonathan Hale had vanished. Even Judge Reed, who had belittled Barron from the start, now looked visibly unsettled. Hale took a deep breath and tried to regain control. "Objection, Your Honor, this is speculation. Mr. Trump is making wild accusations without concrete proof." Barron didn't flinch. "Then let's talk about proof." He turned to the bailiff. "Please submit Exhibit D, Mark Jensen's immunity deal." The bailiff handed the document to Judge Reed, who adjusted his glasses and skimmed the pages. His expression shifted from irritation to mild alarm. Barron continued, walking toward the jury. "The immunity deal states that Mr. Jensen would not face perjury charges no matter what testimony he provided. In other words, he could lie under oath, and it wouldn't matter." Gasps filled the room. A reporter in the back furiously scribbled notes. Judge Reed exhaled sharply. "Mr. Hale, is this true?" Hale hesitated, a second too long. Barron pressed forward. "If the prosecution's case relies on a potentially corrupt witness with legal protection to fabricate testimony, then what are we even doing here?" His voice was calm but firm. "A court is meant to serve justice, not railroad an innocent man based on coerced statements and hidden transactions." Hale's face turned red. "This is a distraction. The financial evidence still points to the senator's guilt." Barron raised an eyebrow. "Then let's discuss that financial evidence." He tapped a thick file on the defense table. "Because what I found will change everything." Judge Reed, who had mocked Barron as an amateur just minutes ago, leaned forward, unable to hide his curiosity. The courtroom held its breath. Something big was coming. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. Barron Trump flipped open the thick file on the defense table, his movements deliberate. The judge, once dismissive, now seemed unsure of himself. The prosecution shifted uncomfortably. Barron held up a document. "This is the official transaction record showing $10 million being funneled into offshore accounts. The prosecution claims Senator Callaway authorized these transfers." He paused. "But there's just one problem." Hale forced a smirk. "And what's that, kid?" Barron's eyes locked onto him. "The timestamps." He walked to the projector and pulled up the transaction logs. Each of these transactions was authorized between 2 p.m. and 2:15 p.m. on August 17th. He turned to the jury. "But do you know where Senator Callaway was at that exact time?" Hale's face went pale. Barron pulled out a security footage still. It showed the senator inside a government building, giving a live televised speech. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. "This footage is time-stamped and verified. There's no way the senator could have personally authorized those transactions. Barron let the evidence sink in. That means either someone forged his credentials or the prosecution is covering for the real culprit. Judge Reed shifted in his seat. His confidence was crumbling. Mr. Hale, do you have an explanation for this? Hale clenched his jaw, flipping through his files, but he had no counter, no excuse. He was trapped. Barron stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. You accused an innocent man. You built your case on a coerced witness, and now the entire foundation of your argument is falling apart. The judge, speechless for the first time, stared at the young man before him. Barron Trump had just shattered the prosecution's case. The courtroom was in chaos. Reporters whispered furiously into their microphones, and the jury exchanged stunned glances. Judge Reed rubbed his temples, visibly shaken. This wasn't how today was supposed to go. Jonathan Hale, the once confident prosecutor, looked trapped. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. Even if the senator didn't personally authorize the transactions, it doesn't mean he wasn't involved. Barron Trump smirked. Nice try, but the law doesn't work on assumptions, Mr. Hale. He picked up another document and held it high. This is an internal audit report from the Treasury Department, obtained through a subpoena just yesterday. He placed it on the evidence table. It shows that the real authorizations came from an administrative assistant with high-level clearance, someone who had access to the senator's credentials. Hale swallowed hard. Barron pressed on. That assistant, Christopher Langley, conveniently resigned a week before these allegations surfaced, and guess what? He's now living in the Cayman Islands. He turned to the jury. What are the chances of that? The room was dead silent. Judge Reed narrowed his eyes at the prosecution. Mr. Hale, why was this never presented? Hale had no answer. His lips parted, but nothing came out. Barron took a step closer to the jury, his voice steady. The prosecution wanted to make an example out of Senator Callaway. They didn't care about the truth, they just needed a scapegoat. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But justice isn't about winning. It's about getting it right. Judge Reed let out a slow breath and leaned forward. I want answers, Mr. Hale, right now. Hale looked down, defeated. Barron Trump had done the impossible. The entire courtroom held its breath. Judge Reed, once so smug and dismissive, now looked deeply unsettled. He turned to Jonathan Hale, his voice sharp. Mr. Hale, why was this evidence not disclosed? Did the prosecution deliberately suppress it? Hale fumbled with his papers, but it was over. He had nothing left. Your Honor, Judge Reed slammed his gavel. Enough, he exhaled, his expression hardening. This court will not be used as a political weapon. The evidence is clear. Senator Callaway was falsely accused, and the prosecution either failed in due diligence or deliberately misled this court. A stunned murmur spread through the room. The judge turned to Barron, studying him for a long moment. The teenager he had mocked, dismissed, and tried to humiliate had just exposed corruption in his own courtroom. Reed cleared his throat. Mr. Trump, against all expectations, you have presented a case that is thorough, compelling, and most importantly, truthful. He sighed, his voice quieter now. I underestimated you, and for that, I owe you an apology. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The same judge who had mocked Barron in front of the world was now publicly admitting defeat. Barron nodded respectfully. Justice isn't about who's the most experienced, Your Honor. It's about who's right. Judge Reed looked toward the jury. Given the overwhelming contradictions in the prosecution's case, I have no choice but to dismiss all charges against Senator Callaway. A moment of silence, then an explosion of cheers. Reporters rushed to broadcast the breaking news. The once arrogant prosecutor slumped in his chair, completely destroyed. As the courtroom emptied, Judge Reed sat alone, staring at his bench. He had spent his entire career believing he was the smartest man in the room. Today, a teenager had proven him wrong, and he would never forget it. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, imagine what other powerful moments are waiting to be uncovered. Like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories of truth, justice, and unexpected heroes. What did you think of Barron Trump's courtroom takedown? Let us know in the comments below.